Good morning. Welcome to At Risk International's weekly Intelligence Insights. My name is Roman Fisher, Protective Intel Analyst here at Risk. Getting started today, as we're all aware by now, last Friday the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, which eliminates the constitutional right to abortion, and the ruling defers authority on the matter to state governments. Protests over the court's decisions continued across the country this weekend. Thousands had gathered in hundreds of cities, both large and small, to show their opposition to the Supreme Court's ruling. Unfortunately, several of those protests turning violent. Examples of that is in Portland, a group of black-clad marchers smashed windows and painted graffiti on downtown businesses. In Phoenix, protests outside the state's capital ended in a volley of tear gas. Protests were described as either peaceful or driven by, quote, anarchists intent on destruction. And in Los Angeles, a man was arrested and charged with attempted murder after he allegedly attacked a police officer during a protest in which he was allegedly threw a makeshift flamethrower at the officer. The officer's okay, however, he was treated for burns. According to a recent ACLED report, abortion-related demonstrations have surged across the U.S., with more events already reported this year than in all of 2021. Demonstrations have become increasingly contentious, with significant rise in counter-demonstrations, armed protests, and engagement by far-right groups like the Proud Boys. These trends that are all linked to heightened risk for violence. Some of the numbers ACLED released, abortion-related demonstrations have made up 14% of all reported protests nationwide. So far in 2020, there have already been 69% more abortion-related counter demonstrations than there were last year. Over 70% of those demonstrations have turned violent or destructive. Abortion-related events involving far-right militias and militant social movements like the Proud Boys have increased 150% in 2021, and so far in 2020, they've increased by 90%. Jane's Revenge continues to call for disorder and attacks against pro-life pregnancy centers. Currently, the group and its supporters are reportedly responsible for acts of vandalism in cities across the nation. Finally, protests are likely to continue and potentially become more organized. Thus, clashes with police and counter-protesters may continue and, of course, increase the likelihood of violence. Protests are likely in states with trigger ban abortion laws, are likely in states which may pass laws relating to abortion. Communities where protests occur are likely to experience traffic disruptions, business interruptions, and in some cases, vandalism is possible. Next, moving on to Ross Hill, Director of Global Risk Intelligence.
Thanks, Roman. So on to a brief update on what's going on with the war in Ukraine. We had Russian missiles hitting Kiev over the weekend, first major strike on the capital since the end of April. And also over the weekend, Russia reportedly gained full control of Severodonetsk, which is the area that's seen a large concentration of fighting over the past few weeks. That's actually considered Russia's biggest military victory since capturing Mariupol in May. There's really only one major city left in the Luhansk region of Ukraine that Russia really needs to take to control the whole of that area, after which it would then likely move on to kind of taking the Donetsk region to control the whole of that Donbass, which is stated primary aim at the moment. The attack on Kiev actually took place at the same time as a G7 meeting was taking place, and also ahead of a NATO meeting this week. The last attack on Kiev was actually when the UN Secretary General visited. So any time we kind of see large political meetings or important political meetings around Ukraine, we can expect kind of maybe some kind of attack on Kiev. The G7 leaders are actually expected to offer more military support to Ukraine, as well as maybe introduce further sanctions against Russia, like banning Russian gold imports, maybe proposing a cap on Russian oil prices, something like that. Ukraine's president addressed the G7. He said he wanted to end the war by the end of this year, basically before winter sets in, called for more weapons. The US is likely to announce this week that it will send some advanced surface-to-air missile defense systems to Ukraine. But the consideration that the war might end by the end of this year does seem very optimistic. To do that, Ukraine would almost certainly have to cede some territory to Russia. I think the best we could possibly hope for is some kind of ceasefire. But even then, I wouldn't be that optimistic on that occurring. In kind of some wider developments, Lithuania over the last couple of weeks has blocked the transport of some goods to and from Kaliningrad, which is a Russian exclave in Europe. That's blocking any goods moving across Lithuania's own territory. It says that it's actually only enforcing EU sanctions, but Russia called the move openly hostile. Russia then has recently announced that it will actually deploy nuclear-capable missile systems to Belarus and provide training on how to use them, and also help Belarus upgrade its air force capability to enable it to carry nuclear weapons. That can't be immediate. That will all take some time. But it's notable that Belarus borders both Ukraine and Lithuania. And then just outside of that, Russia has reportedly defaulted on its debt for the first time since 1998. That was actually a domestic default. This time it's a default on foreign debt. And that's the first time Russia's done that for more than 100 years. But actually, it's more likely this was related to Russia's lack of access to the international financial payment systems rather than it actually not having the money. And the default was actually widely expected, and therefore its impact is likely to be limited. For our next update, there was a terrorist attack in Oslo in Norway over the weekend. At least 2 people killed and 21 injured in a shooting targeting a gay bar in the city. The attack happened in the early hours of Saturday morning, and police are treating it as Islamist terrorism. There was a gay pride march scheduled to take place that same day that was cancelled. The suspect is reportedly a Norwegian of Iranian origin. He was actually known to the security services for his links to Islamic extremists, and actually had a history of violence and threats. But interestingly, the Norwegian security services had reportedly actually interviewed him last month and then concluded that he no longer had violent intentions. There's no group kind of claim responsibility, so it looks like the typical sort of lone wolf attack that we've seen in Europe over the last couple of years. We're not expecting that threat to change significantly. And although we'd never rule out complex coordinated attacks, the most likely types of attacks are self-radicalized individuals or lone wolf attackers using firearms, bladed weapons, vehicles, possibly IEDs, with targets being crowded venues like bars, public transport hubs, that kind of thing. And then for our last update, just a very quick one on monkeypox, now reached about 60 countries with more than 4,000 cases in total. The World Health Organization decided not to declare it a global emergency at a meeting over the weekend. Instead is considering it an evolving health threat, but said it still had serious concerns about the scale and the speed of the current outbreak. So if things continue following the same pattern that it has currently, then we may see the World Health Organization kind of upgrade that risk level in the near future. And that's it from us. We hope you enjoyed the content, and we'll see you again soon.